I've spent 6 decades watching governments make promises. And here's what most people miss about Social Security. The annual adjustment isn't just a number, it's the difference between maintaining your independence and watching your purchasing power evaporate like morning fog. This year's announcement carries particular weight. We're looking at a cost of living adjustment that directly impacts 67 million Americans, yet the conversation around it remains clouded by half-truths and political theater. The Social Security Administration has released the official figures, and what matters isn't the percentage itself. It's understanding exactly how this translates to your monthly check, when you'll see it, and what it means for your Medicare Part B premiums that get deducted automatically. The mathematics here are straightforward, but the implications run deep. If you're receiving the average benefit, we're talking about real dollars that affect real decisions. Whether you can afford your medications, keep up with rising property taxes, or help a grandchild with college. The cruel irony? While your check increases, inflation in essential categories, groceries, utilities, healthcare, often outpaces these adjustments. That's the reality nobody in Washington wants to discuss candidly, but it's exactly what we need to examine together, number by number. Let me tell you something I learned from studying bureaucracies over the years. They operate on predictable patterns, and the Social Security Administration is no exception. Every October, like clockwork, they announce the cost of living adjustment for the following year. This isn't some arbitrary decision made in a smoke-filled room. It's calculated using the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, which they abbreviate as CPIW. Now, I've always found it peculiar that they use urban wage earners as the baseline when the primary beneficiaries are retirees who haven't been wage earners for years, but that's government logic for you. The adjustment we're seeing for this year reflects the economic conditions from the third quarter of the previous year compared to the current year's third quarter. It's a lagging indicator, which means by the time you receive the adjustment, the inflationary pressures that prompted it may have already shifted. This time lag is one of those inefficiencies built into the system that nobody bothers to fix, because fixing it would require congressional action, and Congress moves slower than continental drift. But here's what you need to understand about the current adjustment. It represents a response to genuine economic pressure that millions of Americans have been feeling in their daily lives. When we look at the actual numbers, the average Social Security retirement benefit before this adjustment was sitting at approximately $1,807 per month. With the new cost of living adjustment, we're looking at an increase that pushes this figure higher. Now, I want you to think about what this means in practical terms. If you're receiving the average benefit, you're looking at additional money each month that could cover a week's worth of groceries, or perhaps a couple of utility bills, or maybe a portion of your prescription costs. It's not life-changing wealth, but it's not insignificant either. The problem is that most people focus solely on the percentage increase without doing the actual arithmetic to understand what lands in their bank account. Here's where it gets interesting, and this is something I've observed repeatedly throughout my career. Whenever the government gives with one hand, they often take with the other, though they're rarely transparent about it. Medicare Part B premiums are deducted automatically from your Social Security check. These premiums typically increase each year as well, though not always in perfect synchronization with the cost of living adjustment. This year's Medicare Part B standard premium is running at $174.70 per month for most beneficiaries. That's deducted right off the top before you ever see your Social Security deposit. So when you're calculating your actual increase, you need to factor in whatever Medicare premium adjustment occurs simultaneously. The mathematics here require clear thinking. Let's say you're receiving that average benefit of $1,807. The cost of living adjustment gets applied to that amount, giving you your gross increase. But then Medicare Part B gets deducted, and if that premium increased as well, your net gain is the difference between these two adjustments. This is why some seniors look at their bank deposits after the new year begins and wonder where all that announced increase disappeared to. It's not mysterious, it's just that nobody explains the full picture in terms that make immediate sense. Now let's talk about the maximum benefit, because this affects higher earners who paid the maximum Social Security taxes throughout their working years. If you claimed benefits at full retirement age and had consistently high earnings, you could be receiving the maximum benefit, which before this adjustment was approximately $3,822 per month. The cost of living adjustment applies to this amount as well, and proportionally, the dollar increase is larger. But here's the catch that high earners need to understand. If your income from other sources, pensions, investments, rental properties, exceeds certain thresholds, you'll pay higher Medicare Part B premiums through something called the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount, or IRMA-A. These brackets can push your Medicare premium substantially higher, sometimes 2 or 3 times the standard premium, which means your net Social Security increase gets compressed accordingly. I've always believed in looking at the second and third order consequences of any policy change, and Social Security adjustments are no exception. When benefits increase across the board for 67 million Americans, that's additional money flowing into the economy. Local businesses, particularly in retirement communities, see increased spending. But there's a flip side. This also contributes to inflationary pressure, which can erode the very purchasing power the adjustment was meant to protect. It's a feedback loop that policymakers rarely acknowledge because it complicates the narrative they prefer to present. The timing of when you'll actually see this increase in your bank account depends on your payment schedule. Social Security benefits are distributed on the second, third, and fourth Wednesday of each month based on your birth date. If you were born between the 1st and 10th of the month, you receive benefits on the second Wednesday. If your birth date falls between the 11th and 20th, it's the third Wednesday. And if you were born between the 21st and the end of the month, you receive benefits on the fourth Wednesday. Those who were already receiving benefits before May 1997 received their payments on the third of each month. This staggered system was implemented to distribute the administrative workload and ensure the Social Security Trust Fund doesn't need to have all benefit payments liquid on a single day. Let's address something that causes considerable confusion: the taxability of Social Security benefits. Many people assume that because they paid taxes on their earnings before Social Security taxes were deducted, the benefits themselves shouldn't be taxable. But that's not how the system works. Depending on what the IRS calls your combined income, which is your adjusted gross income plus non-taxable interest plus half of your Social Security benefits, you may owe federal income tax on up to 85% of your Social Security benefits. The thresholds are remarkably low. If you're filing as an individual and your combined income is between $25,000 and $34,000, you may have to pay income tax on up to 50% of your benefits. Above $34,000, up to 85% becomes taxable. For couples filing jointly, these thresholds are $32,000 and $44,000 respectively. These thresholds were set decades ago and have never been adjusted for inflation, which means more seniors fall into these taxation brackets every year simply because of cost of living adjustments and modest investment income. Here's what troubles me about the current Social Security system, and I say this as someone who's spent a lifetime analyzing systems and incentives. We have a fundamental demographic problem that nobody wants to confront honestly. When Social Security was established in 1935, life expectancy was approximately 61 years. The system was designed with the expectation that most people would pay in throughout their working lives and collect benefits for only a few years. Today, life expectancy is approaching 80 years, and people are collecting benefits for 2 or 3 decades. The worker-to-beneficiary ratio has collapsed from 16 workers supporting each beneficiary in 1950 to fewer than 3 workers per beneficiary today. This isn't sustainable without either raising taxes substantially, cutting benefits significantly, or increasing the retirement age considerably. But politicians avoid these conversations because they're electoral poison. The Social Security Trust Fund, which currently holds reserves of approximately $2.8 trillion, sounds substantial until you realize that these aren't actual assets sitting in a vault. They're special issue government bonds, which means the Social Security Administration has essentially loaned this money to the General Treasury. When benefits need to be paid, the Treasury needs to redeem these bonds, which it does by either running a budget surplus, which hasn't happened in years, or by borrowing more money from the public markets or through other mechanisms. This creates a fiscal burden that future generations will shoulder, and it's a reality that deserves more honest discussion than it receives. Now let me address something specific about this year's increase that makes it particularly important. We've experienced genuine inflation in categories that matter most to seniors. Healthcare costs have risen substantially. Prescription drug prices, despite some reforms, continue to increase at rates that exceed general inflation. Home heating costs have been volatile. Property taxes in many jurisdictions have increased as local governments struggle with their own fiscal challenges. Grocery prices have climbed in ways that anyone who does their own shopping can immediately identify. The cost of living adjustment, while welcome, may not fully compensate for these specific increases in the spending categories where seniors allocate most of their fixed income. I want to talk about something that doesn't receive adequate attention: the psychological impact of financial uncertainty on older Americans. When you're working, you have options. You can seek a raise, change jobs, take on additional work, or adjust your career trajectory. When you're retired and living primarily on Social Security, your income is largely fixed. Any erosion of purchasing power directly impacts your standard of living, and there's limited recourse. This creates genuine anxiety, particularly for those without substantial savings or family support. The cost of living adjustment provides some reassurance that the system acknowledges inflation and attempts to compensate for it, even if imperfectly. But the annual waiting for this announcement, the calculations of whether it will be sufficient, and the reality of watching expenses climb faster than income, these create a persistent stress that affects millions of Americans. Let me share an observation from decades of studying how people make financial decisions. Most individuals are far more sensitive to losses than to equivalent gains. This means that even when the cost of living adjustment increases their benefit, if Medicare premiums or other deductions increase simultaneously, they focus more on what's being taken away than on what's being added. This isn't irrational. It's basic human psychology, and it explains why satisfaction with Social Security adjustments often doesn't match the actual dollar increases provided. People remember vividly when their net check barely budged despite announced increases, and this colors their perception of the entire system. The maximum taxable earnings cap for Social Security is another aspect that deserves examination. In the current year, earnings up to $160,000 are subject to Social Security taxes at 6.2% for employees. Earnings above this cap aren't taxed for Social Security purposes. This cap is adjusted annually based on national wage trends. What this means is that high earners pay Social Security taxes on only a portion of their income, while average earners pay these taxes on every dollar they make. This is by design. Social Security was conceived as an insurance program rather than pure welfare, and benefits are capped as well. But it does create a regressive element to the taxation structure that's worth understanding, particularly when we discuss the long-term solvency of the system. Proposals to eliminate or raise this cap surface periodically, but they face significant political resistance. Let's discuss the earned income penalty for those who claim Social Security before reaching full retirement age while continuing to work. If you're below full retirement age and earning more than a certain threshold, currently $21,240 per year, Social Security withholds $1 in benefits for every $2 earned above this limit. In the year you reach full retirement age, the penalty reduces to $1 withheld for every $3 earned above a higher threshold, and it applies only to earnings before the month you reach full retirement age. Once you reach full retirement age, you can earn any amount without penalty. These withheld benefits aren't lost permanently. They're recalculated into your benefit amount after you reach full retirement age. But in the short term, they can create financial complications for those who need or want to continue working while receiving benefits. The cost of living adjustment doesn't change these earnings thresholds, which are adjusted separately, so it's another moving part in a complex system. I want to address the survivor benefits aspect because it's often overlooked in discussions about Social Security adjustments. When someone receiving Social Security dies, their surviving spouse may be eligible for survivor benefits, which could be higher than their own retirement benefit. The cost of living adjustment applies to these survivor benefits as well. For widows and widowers who are managing on a single Social Security check after losing a spouse, these annual adjustments can be particularly significant. The same applies to disabled individuals receiving Social Security disability insurance. The cost of living adjustment applies across all these categories, which is why the impact ripples through the entire social safety net. Here's something that requires clear understanding. The full retirement age for Social Security has been gradually increasing. If you were born in 1960 or later, your full retirement age is 67. You can claim reduced benefits as early as 62, but your benefit is permanently reduced by approximately 30%. You can delay claiming until age 70, and your benefit increases by approximately 8% for each year you delay past full retirement age. These percentages apply to your base benefit, and cost of living adjustments then apply to whatever benefit level you've locked in. This means that claiming decisions you make in your early 60s have compounding effects over decades of retirement. The cost of living adjustment can't fix a claiming decision that was poorly timed for your personal circumstances. The reality that every senior needs to internalize is this: Social Security was never designed to be your sole source of retirement income. It was meant to be one leg of a three-legged stool alongside personal savings and employer pensions. That third leg has largely disappeared, as traditional pension plans have been replaced by defined contribution plans like 401k accounts, which shift investment risk onto individuals. Personal savings rates in America have been inadequate for decades. This means millions of seniors are now relying on Social Security to bear weight it was never engineered to carry alone. The cost of living adjustment helps maintain the purchasing power of these benefits, but it can't compensate for the fundamental reality that many Americans reach retirement age with insufficient overall resources.